41% of household energy consumption comes from firewood. And the even more dramatic picture is if we see the heating. This information comes from the household end use survey that was held by the Association of Young Energy Professionals. And this graph shows that basically around 96% of the heating energy for the household in rural areas comes from the firewood. Households are clearly paying for cost of water supply. And throughout Georgia, we frequently see this anecdotal talks about a lot of resources and why people should have tariffs on water, etc. But it is clear from a current picture of the sector that having a lot of resources and having its supply is not the same thing.
Other than the price, which seems to be low for the moment, at least relative to other countries, what can be done better in terms of ensuring more stable or higher quality supply of the resources that you need to run your businesses?
In the irrigation sector, there's been, I guess, a measurable improvement in the quality and consistency of supply from the amelioration company. They have been given more resources to repair irrigation channels that have been badly degraded from 20 years of neglect. So that's a very pleasing development. There's, however, persistent problems with criminal damage of the irrigation channels throughout the country, whereby individuals or small groups are either breaking holes in pipelines or fracturing the sides of concrete channels and digging their own secondary and tertiary channels to illicitly irrigate their own properties without paying. Frequently, they're also blocking the channel at the same time as they're diverting it. So while 5 or 6 smallholders might benefit, there may be 70 or 80 smallholders who have their water supply cut off at critical times, and maybe 4 or 5 SME operations and 1 or 2 corporate operations on the same channel.
So the reason they do it is in order to get more resources to themselves, right?
And not pay for it.
And not pay for it.
Of course, this results in private losses. It also results in losses to the amelioration company because they have to repair this damage. And the police have to be involved in chasing it down, and this is a great deal of difficulty. As to how this could be improved, many countries have railway police and other police forces allocated to specific infrastructure systems. Given both the public and private losses that accumulate as a result of this criminality, it perhaps should be considered to have an irrigation system police patrolling the network, which I think would be a revenue positive system altogether when it's considered what the losses are as a result of these problems.
In general, I think the relationship between these utility companies and the companies, the industrial companies, has a way to go. In the way of notice, for example, when you stop the water for 2 days or you stop the electricity for 2 days, if you're in a production company, this is a big thing, you know, and you don't want to be told this a few hours before that happens. And so that happens in Georgia. So this is an issue. For an industry, that is a significant issue. On the other hand, I think in terms of dealing with companies from the utility side, so if you have a problem with your water supply or if you have a problem with your electricity supply, as an SME, industrial company, there is a lot of paperwork. And although a lot of these companies have been privatized, you know, there's still the old ways of working in terms of
inertia.
Yes, I mean, you need to apply with a letter, then you have a 20-day or 15 days for them to come back to you. Then there's another question, you need to apply again with another letter, then they come back to you again. And then it's another letter, and then once you get the final thing, it's 30 working days for them to do it, so the whole thing takes 3 months, you know. And so that is something that, as a practitioner in the field, I certainly have seen.
You want to add something?
Yeah, one thing to add is that, I mean, as far as I know, the regulator, the Georgia regulator, has been working very hard in the last year or two to introduce quality-based pricing of electricity supplies. And I believe this is going to be rolled out fairly soon. And that, I think it can come one minute too soon, I think, to Georgia.
So Mario, why don't you break the news?
Electricity quality. We have to mention, probably most of you know that GNERC has introduced and adopted a new resolution about grid code, transmission grid code, and this grid code consists mostly of issues and specific topics covering transmission grid. So how transmission grid operates. It also will have detailed information about electricity quality. Those specific topics are now being in progress, so Commission is working on that, and those will be incorporated in the grid code. The grid code, except transmission grid regulation, comprises distribution grid regulation as well. But at this stage, only first 4 chapters have been approved by the Commission in April this year, and we have a deadline by the law. When I'm saying the law, this is the law on electricity and natural gas, and the deadline for that is June 2015. So by that time, Commission will have grid code, which will cover those two sectors, transmission and distribution. And moreover, it also will comprise the monitoring system, what is electricity supply, whether it complies with the standard norms that will be established, and how this may be monitored by Commission. Thank you.
Mario, a very quick follow-up question and related to what has been raised here. Who has the power, the authority in Georgia to tell companies who are regulated, I believe, or maybe not, how to manage their communication with the
This directly does not fall within the regulation of GNERC. We cannot tell company that, for example, in 2 days you have to respond to the client. This is a relationship of private nature, and this is up to the private companies to do it in the reasonable time of period. If we are talking about the public law entities, then there is the administrative code, general administrative code, which obliges the public entities to make decisions within the reasonable terms, and specific terms are also established that no more than 10 days, for example, you have to make an official written answer, you have 1 month for responding and so forth. But as per the when we are talking about the, for example, public information that is publicly available, this is also infringed by the and regulated by the Administrative Code of Georgia. But when we are talking about the day-to-day private correspondence and communication within the private companies and the clients or other entities, it is up to the companies to regulate.
It's free of regulation.
Nicholas, I would like you to indeed to continue this conversation.
Yeah, translate. Okay, firstly, some numbers from the irrigation sector. So, currently, the company can service about 88,000 hectares of land throughout the whole Georgia. And out of this 88,000, we are contracting about half of the land to irrigate. So half of the customers are supposed to pay. And we are collecting only 30% of contracts that we established. So we are extremely poor performers in terms of commercial activities and financial activities. Right now we started a program of customer service improvement that allow us to speed up processes in regard to servicing the customers. From financial perspective, the sector structure does not provide big hopes unless it's amended, changed drastically, I would say.
What is the main problem? Is it tariffs?
It's the structure of tariff and the size, amount of tariff. For example, even if we subcontract all land we can service, irrigate, and we collect 100% of money, still we can't pay salaries. That's, I guess, clarifies things what problems are within the company. So, our company has the same problem as drinking water company. So I'm consulting both companies, that's why I have 2 bottles of water here. So just to give you some perspective what the problem is. So if you are not honest guy from nature and you don't believe in God, it makes no sense in Georgia not to steal water, whether it's irrigation or drinking water. How the regulation structure works, how the tariff works, how the fines and penalties work, especially if you are heavy user of water, both irrigation and drinking water, you should steal. Because if you get caught first time, somebody will warn you that you are a poor guy, and you will pay the amount you were supposed to pay initially. If you are not caught, then you will make some savings. So this approach should change definitely. Otherwise, the prospects of these 2 sectors does not look so bright, I would say.
Do you face the same situation with drinking water? I must share my experience of recently writing about the situation in Kazbegi. We discussed this before the dialogue started. We went to Kazbegi, to the Rooms Hotel there, and what we found out is that, contrary to what one could have expected, there is a very tense situation in the local town because the hotel is competing for water with the local community. There's simply not enough water for everybody in winter time. And the hotel management found half the village knocking on their door or gates in the middle of winter, and created a very unpleasant situation. What's your view on this?
Your question that what can be done without huge investments, unfortunately, I would not be optimistic. Actually, a lot of people think that a lot could be done, and at least water could be supplied for free or very cheap, at least. But unfortunately, the case what you have mentioned, it requires investment. It requires because the infrastructure what we have now, it did not consider development of this area, and that's the problem because actually maybe when it was designed from the beginning, it was enough for supply of all the people living there. But
can I just, I fully agree with what you were saying, but just a small clarification. You know, when a major hotel is built in a place like Kazbegi, it doesn't appear from thin air. You know, it doesn't appear it doesn't fall from heaven. So it takes maybe 2 years for the hotel, maybe even more, 3 years for the idea to be conceived, get necessary approvals. Then the investment is raised, money for investment is raised, and finally they start building. So, and it's clear that the hotel is going to consume water. It's clear. So the question is whether there was any communication with the company on the water issue. Were you involved? Were you there?
So the communication, of course, there is always communication before starting constructions because even during construction, they need water. They cannot start working process without having water. But unfortunately, the knowledge of the customers themselves are not very high, and in most cases, it's difficult to calculate the amount of water. And the issue that we have that most of customers are not metered creates this situation that, according to calculations, the water will be enough for everyone. But only this hotel is metered, but no the remaining people. And the consumption is the same for the hotel which has 50 rooms, and for the house hotel, family hotel which has 2 or 3 rooms. But the consumption is the same. And the problem mainly we have in winter, when in mountainous regions they take the taps open, otherwise it will freeze. So the situation is that of course the communication can start before, but unless you do not make the infrastructure perfect, and in infrastructure I don't mean only pipes or pumps, but also metering, also the new standards, new technologies, then you have a situation that the water is enough for everyone on the books and on the papers, but in reality it's not.
Yeah, what I hear, you want to add something, okay, Nicholas.
In your case, in Kazbegi, I guess you experienced this problem in winter.
Not me, I didn't experience this problem, but the hotel did.
The hotel, not you. The problem is that during the regular time, the water sources available are mostly enough for most part of the Georgia. I'm talking about drinking water now. So, but during winter time, the last year and year before, the company adopted policy in order to avoid freezing meters, to let customers keep tap open in order water not to freeze. So it puts heavy pressure on the water sources. There is not enough water everybody to have their tap open all the time. So that's another problem why people experience this issue. So.
For your information, this problem will not be any more case this winter because our company has invested some resources in order to get more water and to have more access on water. So hope that this winter it won't be the case.
How about Tusheti?
One more thing regarding the Kakheti region, for example. So if irrigation company and drinking water company cooperate, there is very interesting opportunities. For example, I have learned, it was news for me as well, for example in Dedoplis Kharo, we are planning to rehabilitate our irrigation system there. When we irrigate this system, when we rehabilitate this system, it will help drinking water resources there. That was big news for me, but I guess such kind of opportunities exist in many places throughout the countries. Mainly in East Georgia. In West, we don't have this problem.
Let me come to the Ministry of Energy. If so far you were not given the opportunity. Lisa, you've been listening to everybody around this table. What is your, not just the view of the problem, where is your role as opposed to junior? What is under your control? What can you do to improve efficiency?
In regards to water is not under the
It's not under the Ministry of Energy.
Yes,
Good for you.
environmental protection now, so they're the ones who are dealing with it. We mostly deal with the electricity and gas, and so I can answer that regards all the questions you need to get information for. But in regards to water, as I explained, but in regards to electricity, yes, if you're asking about the energy efficiency and clean energy, it is our priority to develop these two directions. And for that reason, actually, we have two ongoing projects, such as LEDS project. It's the name of this project, with help of USAID. There was like $14 million US dollars allocated for that reason. And another one is the agreement, Mayor's Agreement. So with the framework of these two ongoing projects, we're planning to have some kind of market research that will help us to see what strategy has to be really taken into development of this energy efficiency. And actually what's important here is that to increase the public awareness and to have the developed technology.
Just a clarification, you were talking about efficiency for households or for industry, both?
It could be for both.
Both.
For both, definitely, because but again, on the contrary to it, we have to understand that will increase the time. It will with the new technology. It will happen definitely, but this is something that we are working to see what this two projects will develop and what will be the outcome, so that we can go from there. But yes, definitely it's our priority to develop to these directions.
Okay. Anything on the efficiency side that anybody wants to add?
Perhaps on water use efficiency for the agricultural sector, it's perhaps a little premature given that there's so much difficulty just in managing collection of tariffs from the existing system. But water-saving irrigation equipment has not yet made much of an impact in Georgia, partly because of cost. It can cost up to $3,000 a hectare to install. That's with maybe a 20-year life on the system. Return on investment, depending on crop, can be as little as 2 seasons, or it can be more like 6 or 7, depending on the crop. However, in parts of southern Georgia, Sagarejo, Gardabani in particular, there are areas there where the irrigation system is being repaired and improved, but these areas have saline subsoil. So if you heavily irrigate these with flood irrigation, the water table rises, the salt rises with it, and you turn the whole area into a desert that can't be rehabilitated. This is an important thing to consider, that if irrigation is going to develop in these very promising areas that can be very productive if carefully managed, whether there needs to be regulation of the kind of irrigation used there to preserve the environment or not is something that needs to be looked at, and the private sector is willing to work with government on bringing that to pass.
Mm-hmm. Just a comment in terms of the efficiency, and so there's a close relationship between the companies, let's say Telasi and the other Transgas and these kind of companies, and the subcontractors. And this is something you have to say, and you do see. And I think what would really help, because that relationship, let me say, in a relatively clear way, it's a very close relationship. Which impacts price, which impacts timing, and if there could be an incentive for subcontractors to have, for more independent subcontractors to be, to have a chance. I think that would make a big difference.
So what you were saying, we need more competition in this segment.
I guess, yeah, so below
the large companies.
Because, so the way it happens, and I guess I've seen it on occasions, I'm not saying it's the general rule, but, the person that will make a decision in the bigger company has links to the person in the subcontracting company, and that sort of makes it a very too close connection, actually. And if you as a customer have the choice between more different people, and that would really help. And I think also for the quality assessment. So especially in gas, we have seen this in two factories. So we didn't see the gas as being at a certain quality, at the quality that the company was supposed to. Yes. So this is 2 separate factories, relatively separated from each other, and because you can easily see it. The flame is either blue or red. And if for 2 months it's red instead of blue, when you have the same number on the screen, then there's a problem. But again, the way to assess the quality of the gas is through those subcontractors. So that's not helpful. So that's just something to keep in mind, that relationship between the big companies and the small companies underneath that do all the work.
Okay, I think we sort of exhausted the efficiency gains potential here. What I took away from this discussion to some extent is that some of the problems we are facing, and I think this is the non-collection problem and some other issues with metering, is that energy and water policy is very much used as a social policy, not surprisingly, which may be not the most efficient way to deal with social problems in the first place. So maybe the social problems should be dealt with social policies, and the energy sector should be managed in a more efficient manner. Perhaps this is what I heard from that side of the table. And here, what I heard is, again, there's some issues of communication that could be improved. Not clear exactly who is responsible. Part of the problem is inertia. Part of the problem is, again, these close relationships, perhaps, that are preventing competition. If there were competition, the communication would have been much faster. without any regulation. They would essentially be running to you instead of you running after them. You want to say something?
There was this initiative from the EBRD, the Energy Efficiency Credit, that was managed by several banks, and in general, basically it was by support of EBRD that people were getting the credit with very low interest rates. They were basically making some 10% saving on the energy efficient technologies. But the problems that we clearly saw there was that all those people were taking this kind of credit and they were investing in the energy efficiency. The quality of technologies they were buying was not very high. So what we clearly saw was that frequently the problem was awareness of what to buy. Where you're standing, seeing the technologies, and for instance, the windows, the people are buying the windows that are bad in terms of energy efficiency, but they are getting credit. So in any case, when you're driving this kind of the energy efficiency policy with the business approach, this kind of project, it is very important to have very good administration of all this stuff. I will down and like that.
Okay, let's move on maybe to the next item, and the next item is really investment, how it is financed, and how the priorities are set. Maybe again we start actually the other way around, start with the ministry, because I think you have a lot of say there.
Well, I guess you mean investment in the energy projects. Yes. I mean, first of all, I just want to highlight here the development of energy sector as well as any other sectors, but I would highlight the energy because I think it's directly linked to the development of economy of our country. And developing energy sector, we have to use our current resources, and this is the hydro. And I've heard in the presentation the solar project and wind project, which is very good also, but from the investment perspective, it's not really attractive for the investors. And the principle that we use in Georgia, it's a build, own, operate principle, and it's not a BOT, which means that the plant, when it becomes operational, becomes in the ownership of the investor till the end of its life. And the involvement of the government and the ministry is not really high in that regard. What we did in Georgia, we simplified procedures, and this is kind of a lot of things have been done to make it more attractive and business-friendly environment in Georgia. Because we want it or not, Georgia is more or less credit risky country to compare with other countries. So we have to use what we have efficiently. That's what I believe in. And in reality, we have hydro, and we have to develop this sector. We have a lot of projects, which we have, with help of ISET prepared. We have on the feasibility study level, and we have around 77 projects that are ongoing. Not all of them are under construction, definitely, but we have like 17, which is under construction, which is around 700 megawatt installed capacity. We have 50 with the feasibility study, and other ones are on the different stages of the obtaining the licenses and permits.
But let me ask you this question. The context of this debate is inclusive growth. How do you see the link between inclusivity, job creation, and income for people, and the current approach to the development of the energy sector? I mean, what is the purpose of generating additional energy or electricity resources? For the moment, what I heard for many years is the idea of selling to Turkey. But that does help. Does that help the inclusivity objective?
Well, first of all, developing projects, most of the projects are located in the regions. First of all, when this project is under construction, let's say, the local people, of course, this is one thing. Roads. Because most of the projects are in high mountains, so investors really need to have some infrastructure. So this is additional thing that this region can get. In regards to energy, what happens is that, as you understand, the river flows really get lower in the winter period. And this is a period when we do import electricity. And the range of importing the electricity over the several years have been varying maybe from 500 to 700 megawatt. In general, we are 80% energy mix dependent country. It's not only electricity, but it's also gas. To view everything from this perspective, we need to develop projects. Most of the projects are on run-of river, which means that the summer period we have an excess of electricity, and this is a period when we do export electricity. But we do not have many projects with reservoirs. And reservoirs really help us to save this water for the winter period when we have a deficit of electricity, and to somehow replace import of electricity in this period.
No, I'm fully aware. No, I recently learned.
Yeah, Turkish, you meant, export, right?
Yeah.
And I think you probably know about this new line, 500 kV line that was constructed, and it was done with the help of EBRD, which is a credit that needs to be paid back. Exporting electricity is not just only helping Turkish side, but also paying taxes in Georgia, which goes in the budget, paying the tariff to export electricity to the border of Turkish border. So there are other benefits that Georgia gets.
No, I'm sure. I was about to say that just recently I read about a interesting new project in Gardabani, which at first I didn't quite understand the nature of it. The project is I think it's done by a French company using French technology to build a very large greenhouse complex in Gardabani. And at first I was okay, it's a nice interesting initiative, but I didn't quite understand the nature of it. And then more recently I spoke to somebody, maybe Simon to you, maybe to somebody else, and I was told that the reason this project is located in Gardabani in a particular location is because it's situated right next to a TPP, to the thermal power plant. And so it uses the energy, the extra heat created by the thermal power plant in order to do something good in agriculture. Now this basically brings me to the very important concept of synergy. This is just an excellent example. But I just think that if the energy policy, the energy strategy of the country is viewed through this synergetic prism, I think a lot more could have been achieved. Because I can think of synergy between energy and manufacturing, energy and agriculture, energy and tourism, energy and maybe the mountain development of regions, but not separately. You really have to look at the combination. The question is, does that kind of thinking happen?
However, I should tell you one thing. Water has to be above 95 degrees. So I don't know what is the one, but we look for thermal waters, and in case it's below that, it can warm up a greenhouse. So there are limitations.
Yeah. Limitations are always there, but the synergies are also there. So
you mentioned the two very nice words, energy strategy. And I mean, that's an issue that is still to be addressed by Georgia, because the country has had so many urgent priorities that it's focused all its policy making into addressing these priorities, but the long-term thinking it still needs to be shaped, and I think that's something that would also it's critical also to provide a path for investors and to identify and to prioritize these investments that we're talking about. So until that's put in place, I think we're missing an important piece of the jigsaw. Then when we come to investments, the ministry has been talking about the supply. I mean, investments on the supply side. I mean, because again, I mean, one of Georgia's urgent priorities has been security of energy supplies, and that's been crucial since 2004 and was reinforced again with events in 2008. But now, going forward, we have to look, or it would be important to look at investments on the demand side. This is what we're talking about. This is where energy efficiency again comes in. We have to look at insulation, we have to look at construction materials. I mean, it's a whole new industry. I mean, you can call it a green economy to an extent, but it's a whole new industry that, unlike investments on the supply side, will become a going concern. I mean, you will constantly need materials, energy efficient equipment, etc.
Other agencies.
Can I comment on energy?
Please.
I'm not a kind of guy who is expert in everything, but there are certain industries. I guess I have right to speak, and energy is one of them, because I spent several years there. So when we are talking about development of hydro energy, you remember, all of you, I guess, remember the project the government started concessioning development of many hydro plants throughout Georgia. But I guess there was one mistake done there. Nobody had looked at how value chain in this industry works. So what I mean, okay, you have right, you come, you build, but you need to sell electricity somewhere. But there is no demand for that. And everybody loves to talk about the transmission line to Turkey. But to the best of my knowledge, when government was concessioning new projects, new hydro plant projects, most of this line was already booked.
Yes.
So that's why I would say that is one of the reasons why this not all, but many of these hydro plant projects did not develop. Because you can't sell power, so why should you build it? I would suggest ministry and everybody, all of us, to think from that perspective. So these are the guys we are inviting, investors who need decent return on their investment. So it means they should sell, first of all. That's a point I wanted to make about energy.
But can you also answer my question about your involvement in discussions across, interministerial discussions?
We are mainly involved with the Ministry of Agriculture because our key target is improving the agriculture sector of it. But our company is, of course, involved in energy generation. We are providing our water reservoirs and our canals for hydro power plants. We would love to see more of them installed because they generate additional revenue for us. I mean, synergies are there, so this opportunity should be explored endlessly. But frankly said, I would love to have private companies involved in that, not the government. Sorry to the government, but government is the worst player in the arena, in this game, I would say.
Which are in the same subject?
Yes, thank you. The question started from investments, and I would like to mention that in order to improve the water supply and wastewater, we need huge investments. And basically, our main investors are donor organizations, which give us loans, cheap loans actually. We have quite big investments. One of them is financed by Asian Development Bank, and the amount is $500 million US. And another one is financed by European Investment Bank, and the amount is 80 million euro. So this amount gives us ability to, in following 3-4 years, to improve water supply. What results we have besides the improved water supply? Actually, the most amount out of these investments are spent in infrastructure works, which is basically requires workmen. And these workmen are people who live in those areas where the works are done. For example, Taisi, Zuglidi, etc. This is one result. Another result is that when we prioritize, and that was also the question, we research what result we have after increased water supply. So, for example, we have done investments in touristic areas, which we believe will help private sector to develop their businesses as well, like we did in Baguriani, we do in Mestia, Anaglia, Borjomi, etc. So this is one more goal of our investments, and we believe that this is additional support of our economy, not only improved water supply. Counterparts in other governmental organizations, they first of all, our company itself is state-owned company, and our partner is managing partner is Ministry for Regional Development and Infrastructure, which means that we have to cooperate with other utilities, other organizations like, for example, road department, because our goal is to plan the investments in that way that we don't have to pay twice. For example, we do road. If we do road, then we put pipes. We have to pay twice in order to make
First
repay.
pipes,
So,
then roads.
or at the same, so at least the period shouldn't be too long. So otherwise, people have water, but they before they go home, they jump too long. So with the municipalities, we cooperate and we plan together. So this is one key issue to cooperate with not only with road but other utilities like railway, like energy companies, because we have together underground some connections. Yeah. And the other issue is to improve this social issues, considering that if we don't have water somewhere, we have to cooperate where to invest. So we have money actually at this stage, so we are now prioritizing where to spend this money. And for your information, at the same time, we have now, during this year, we will have about 30 towns ongoing infrastructure works.
30?
30.
Towns?
Yes. Urban centers.
Okay.
Yes, sure. I just want to thank Mr. Nicholas for the comment, and I want to make some clarification. No, seriously, it's just the fact that we can purchase only in the winter period. It's not a hidden information. This is how we perform the tenders, and that's how the winner is revealed. And when they come to us, they already know that tariff from Nguri cannot be really replaced, which is really low. But there are other options. Let's say, for example, we have one company that is constructing factory in Rustavi, and they want 50 megawatt plant to construct for themselves. An investor is free to sign agreements straight directly with the factory or any other business and sell the electricity. What I'm saying is that we cannot really give the whole year for the price they desire, but there could be some kind of negotiation, and there are some other options, not only exporting to Turkey, but to sell it on the local market. I just want to make some comment on it.
A quick question to Nika. My understanding is that the reason you mentioned why your company's performance is not efficient is not proper tariff system. But probably I'm sure there are other reasons. And I'm interested about one of them. Is that one of the main reasons or not? As far as I know, about 20% of land is properly registered in Georgia. Does it create problem for your company? If, as far as I know, in addition to it, as far as I know, the World Bank is going to finance big irrigation project. If similar reform, if land registration, government is starting pilot land registration project, but it's going to be done probably in several villages and that's all. If that registration system is not done properly in the whole Georgia, how you see the implementation of the World Bank irrigation project?
Thank you for the question. In addition to the tariff, what's the problem? I would say the biggest challenge, and I would say even the bigger than tariff issue, is our mindset as a company. the leadership problem, I would say. You know that leadership was changed recently, so hopefully this will be resolved. So the problem was that this company was all about spending money, not delivering result. It was all about spending money. We were spending money there, and nobody cared about outcomes of the spending. So officially, this company became business several years ago, but still, my company is operating like the department of the ministry. The mindset is there. So the sooner we start act like a business, the sooner this company will become efficient. So I want to recall experience of energy sector. So the big changes in, as you recall, the big changes in energy sector started back in 1999 when the Tbilisi utility was sold to the American company, and I became affiliated to that company that time. So, and what result do we have? In the energy sector, we have at least two big players like Telasi and EnergoPro at some extent, and several others who are businesses who are striving for efficiency improvement, who care about the return on capital, etc., etc. So, in our area, I guess I think we are too much obsessed in this country with the concept of natural monopolies. So, one of my colleagues were talking about introducing the competition. For example, in power distribution, energy distribution, gas distribution, etc. It can be done. This model was adopted in many countries. It's working, let's say. So, right now, sorry, but the system by system I mean was legal framework, regulation, our mindset, etc. It's not about delivering results. It's all about just working. It's very process-oriented, not result-oriented. That's the reality, I would say. Sorry for being so hard on many things, but that's the reality. That's my understanding. I might be wrong. So, in regard to land registration, I would say about a third of our customers have the land registered. It's a huge problem. You know, it's a common practice when they want to set up agreement with us for irrigation. People used to report less land than they actually had. So, and last year the company started to kind of measuring land by itself, so, and putting it as a part of an agreement. And this process is going to continue. One initiative we are taking right now is about providing some incentives. Unfortunately, we are regulated business and we can't do many things with the prices. But there are other things we are intending to introduce in order to force farmers to register lands. Like, for example, we will allow farmers who have land registered to pay for our services by installments. For other farmers, we will require advance payments. There are several other things that we are thinking about before we will adopt new tariff methodology and new tariff system is adjusted. That's what we want to introduce in order to somehow try to put this industry in order and get this land registered. I remember the case of Peru, if I remember correctly. The Peru had land registration rate about 7%. So 7% of Peru land in Peru was registered, and during several years, they introduced project, and by 2005, if I remember correctly, they had 81% of land registered. So it can be done. There is experience of that. So, and we want to contribute from our side a little bit in order to have this land registered. In that regard, everything, most of the things will be settled, I would guess. Did I answer that on Rezo?
So, as I understood, it's one of the main problems for you.
Tariff is one of the main problems, land registration is one of the main problems, but
Thank you.
Leadership.
that's the biggest problem I would
But
say.
I wanted to hear.
Not in only our industry, but
I mentioned World Bank project, irrigation project. So let's assume that government is not going to implement nationwide land registration. World Bank started, or government started project, irrigation project financed by the World Bank. So don't you see problems here in this case?
as I said,
Or it can be solved using different things as you mentioned.
as I said, this company mostly was about spending the money, not delivering the decent return on World Bank money or government money or anything. So that's what we are going to change. So we have planned to bring this company within 7 years to the status when this company can access capital markets itself and start implementing what we call commercial irrigation projects. Right now, we are just beggars. We are going out and begging everybody in the world, and in Georgia particularly, mostly government, please give us money for salaries, for fuel for our cars, for mobile phones, and for eventually to rehabilitate some channels as well. So, yeah, that's it.
So I heard several times the word synergy, but I'm interested in a bit different term. What about conflict of interest, especially in eastern part of Georgia, between, for example, your company's activities and hydropower stations? Are there any conflict of interest? As far as I understand, hydropower, not runoff hydropowers, but dams, they accumulate water during summer in order in winter to have enough water. And during summer, farmers need irrigation, yes? How it works, or there are no problems?
Actually, I would say that out of 5 million revenues we are generating, about slightly more than 1 million is about 1 million, I would say, is given us by hydro plants. So far, we managed the situation that we were providing enough water for the hydros and enough water for the farmers. The hydros, again, we come here. So during the summertime, and please correct if I'm wrong, during the summertime, electricity is cheap, right? Of course, the hydro plants would prefer to be able to sell more during more expensive times, let's say. Either export to Turkey or, but the fact is that the water is running, our core business is about irrigating lands. So these hydropower plants are, I wouldn't say forced, but they have to allocate our business model, what business are we in. So it's cooperation. So I wouldn't say it's a conflict of interest because most of the investment for providing them water was done by our company, not their company. So this model is working, I would say.
I would add that the conflict of interest is between two types of water, so drinking water and irrigation water, in those areas where not both of them exist. So we have a lot of areas where we have drinking water infrastructure but not irrigation water, and when the farmers or people don't have alternative, they are using drinking water, and finally it gets resulted they have irrigation water from the drinking water pipes, but they don't have drinking water. So it creates really the conflict of interest between these two types of water.
I live on Gogi Bashvili Street here in Tbilisi, which my exact address is Mesa Meshesach Mirod Chichi. So Chichi is like a very small, city, tiny street, a dead end, yes? And all the people who live in this little street, they have the cleanest cars in the world because they don't have jobs, all they do, they wash their cars all day long. Anytime I come.
But how they have cars? Yeah.
Well, they have some old, but they're absolutely clean. Yes.
Just some statistics. I told you that I'm also consulting the drinking water company, so I know numbers. So we have one region. The drinking water company has one region. The region that I love, it's Kalandadze, but it's a worst region from the business perspective. So per capita consumption there is way above 1,500 liter per person per capita. It's a huge.
Of which water?
Drinking. I'm talking about drinking water. So that's a huge. I mean, I would not name the number of water losses per day. I'm not talking about per month. I'm like 1,500 liter per person per day in Kalandadze region. So in other regions, it's about 700 to 800 liter per day. In Tariff, for this company, for unmetered customers, the regulator considers just 300 liter per capita per day. So, I mean, the reality is that people are irrigating, people are just splashing with water. I mean, we live in the ocean of drinking water. That's a fact. So, it's the numbers.
More questions from the crowd.
KfW, German Development Bank. We're working here in the energy sector since 1993, actually, financing projects. And we are also the lead financier of this Turkey line, just a side remark, not in their deep, but they have been involved too. I'm a little bit surprised about this somehow negative assessment, in particular if it comes to the electricity or energy sector. And I would really like to know, is the reliability or quality of electricity supply really an obstacle for development? Because this somehow contradicts my experience living in Tbilisi for 3 years now. I think that the blackouts or cutoffs have been 2 times per year or something, so the system is more or less stable. Georgia is, if you see it over the whole year, a net exporter of energy, which was totally different 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So for us, it's more or less a success story, but maybe we are not objective because we are financing the sector. So the question is really, in particular to you, is energy or sustainable energy supply obstacle for development still? Because this would be a surprise for me.
In Georgia, one of our most famous writer said a word, like something that sounds in English something like that. We should say bad things to people we love directly and to our enemies behind the scenes. So that's why we are complaining and saying bad things here.
Maybe just a point on that. So if you get 2 or 3 days at minimum notice, then yes, it's okay. But if you get a day's notice, hour's notice, or even no notice at all as it happens, that's a complete catastrophe. If you have people, in your factory, and suddenly everything shuts up, it's just.
What about the backup power?
Of course.
Inigo, you had a comment on this, yes?
Yeah, just maybe to add. I mean, that there's 2 different issues. I mean, one is the reliability of the transmission system. I mean, I'm talking here about both electricity and gas, and the reliability of the distributing companies. And I think we have to. It would be useful to actually have some statistics. They're not available, but statistics on the reliability of the distributed systems. I think we could find some interesting information backing up what has been mentioned earlier about the lack of reliability. But again, it's an issue of.
A question to Mario actually. I mean, do you have statistics on performance?
Unfortunately, I cannot speak about statistics. All I can say is that the reliability standards for transmission grid operation are in place from the regulatory perspective, and the companies have to follow, and they have to put all important measures in order to meet the requirements that the in our case, transmission grid code has put in place. But it would be very nice to have some representatives from the companies, energy sector, like, for example, Georgian State Electricity System would be very nice to have their position on the specific issues, as well as from the distribution companies. As per the distribution grid operation, as I have mentioned, we are still in progress, working on the specific regulation to cover all important issues like reliability of the grid, the adequacy of the system, and so forth. Unfortunately, I cannot go further, giving some detailed information about statistics.
I've lived in some other countries before coming to Georgia, but I have the impression that I have to replace many more bulbs in Georgia than any other place I used to live. I'm not a specialist.
Quality of bulbs are not good.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
Salome Gelashvili from ISET Policy Institute. I have a question about related to investments. I mean, there were some figures mentioned here, and we know that there are even more investments in the water supply system and sewage and related infrastructure. I think it's to more.
I can answer that.
Yeah, so for example, Millennium Challenge, which invested also around 60 million USD in this infrastructure, and still some cities like Kutaisi, Potikobuleti, they still experience these problems with, population still experience problems with water supply, and it has its schedules for water supply and so on. So I'm just interested to know your thoughts on why this happens. Is it efficiency issue of allocating funds? Is it coordination issue among implementing and donor parties? Or is it just lack of funds? So these are huge funds, but they are still not enough. So, what are your thoughts on this?
The simple answer to that would be the money that is coming, especially to this company, is too little for its needs. Just some statistics. In many areas, the drinking water company servicing, it's losing about 65% of water it produces. Because of poor infrastructure. There are leaks everywhere, so water goes to the ground directly after being treated. Plus, the tariff regulation structure, the tariff structure, etc., does not motivate people to consume water wisely. So people are irrigating. So the very simple statistics: 65% of water is lost. Part of it is due to poor infrastructure. Part of it is for illegal consumption, due to illegal consumption. But poor infrastructure plays its roles, and we are talking here not millions, we are talking about billions in investment needs for this company. Most of Georgia water, and especially wastewater, that's another big story. So there is no wastewater treatment at all in this country, I would say. As a guy from the irrigation company, I'm also interested what's getting in our rivers, because we are supplying this water to the farmers eventually. So, to construct, the problem is that even in cities where there were some sort of wastewater collection systems there, in most parts this collection system is in so bad shape that it's not about rehabilitation, it's about rebuilding one. And we need to do this in all the cities. Coastline, take coastline. Do you know what water we are swimming in our sea, Black Sea? So,
Don't ask them.
don't swim. No, don't swim. No. We are supporting tourism there, but we should think what people are swimming in, yeah? Right. So, we are talking about billions. We are not talking about millions of dollars. We are talking about billions of dollars that's need for this company and for this company as well.
You have two companies.
So, many billions.
the regional director for KfW, and the light on water gets a little bit too dark for me. So, situation is not as bad as you think. So, for example, if we speak about these losses, yeah. So, if we have a river and we don't take anything of the river, we have 100% loss because we are not using the water. So the question is there very much: what is the status of water supply? Then we have to see, if we talk about tariffs, that water is extremely emotional. Emotional in that sense that people feel a need for water if they do not have drinking water and they have it only for 1 hour a day or only for sometimes a week or so, so that they really have to look and they have to carry something up above and so on. People are prepared to pay for that tariffs. The thing, I think, which is inherent to water is that we are looking too much on the tariff for drinking water, which able to get that operative done and investment done and so on, that is quite a little. The real thing is the wastewater. But wastewater, if you have a damaged system there and everything goes into the quarry here, who cares about whether this is clean or not? So do you want to pay for your wastewater? And there the problem begins. So it's an issue here of many factors. And I can say, at least for Batumi, where KfW has rebuilt everything, the water quality of the Black Sea is okay.
I wouldn't name the city, I wouldn't name the donor, etc., etc. So in one of cities, the modern wastewater treatment plant was built there. So the problem is that we, as this company, cannot get wastewater to there to treat. So such things happen. So that's why I'm talking about coordination, synergies. So that's a reality. We have the modern, I wouldn't say the most modern plant in the world, but one of the modern plant, but we cannot get our wastewater there.
კი, რა თქმა უნდა, ამას ამ ეს პროექტები მოიტანს ბევრ სამუშაო ადგილს და ეს არის მისასალმებელი ძალიან, თუმცა ჩვენ ვთვლით, რომ ეს უნდა სამუშაო ადგილი უნდა იყოს ერთი ღირსეული და მეორე აუცილებლად უნდა იყოს მწვანე. ერთი მხრივ იმით ღირსეულში იგულისხმება ის, რომ იყოს კოლექტიური ხელშეუხებელი მოლაპარაკებების შესაძლებლობა, კარიერული წინსვლის განვითარება და უშუალოდ სიტყვისა და გამოხატვის მაღალი ხარისხი.
ეს ერთ-ერთი პირობა არის ჩვენგან ინიცირებული, რომ ადგილობრივი მოსახლეობა დასაქმდეს. თუმცა ეს მე არ ვიცი თქვენ რას გულისხმობთ, რომ ეს უნდა იყოს ადგილი, რომ წინსვლისთვის მე მესმის, მაგრამ ეს არის პროექტი, რომელიც იწყება და რაღაცა პერიოდის შემდგომ თავდება. ამავდროულად ახალი ტექნოლოგიებიდან გამომდინარე, შეიძლება ეს მართლად იყოს აბსოლუტურად ტექნიკურად და სულ 2-3 ადამიანი იყოს ამაში ჩართული. ეს მეორე ფაქტორი. ჩვენ როდესაც მათ ვეუბნებით და ვთხოვთ და ეს არის ერთ-ერთი ჩვენი მოთხოვნა, რომ დასაქმდეს ადგილობრივი მოსახლეობა, ჩვენ უფრო გულისხმობთ მუშახელს და გამომდინარე იქიდან, რომ ჩვენ ვერ მოვთხოვთ კომპანიას, რომ აუცილებლად ქართველი ინჟინერია იყვანოს, ან აუცილებლად აიყვანოს ქართველი მენეჯმენტში, იმიტომ რომ ეს არის მისი თანხა, მისი ინვესტიცია, აბსოლუტურად თავის თავზეა გაღებული ამ ინვესტიციის ამოღებაც. აქედან გამომდინარე, ჩვენი ჩარევა ამ კუთხით, როგორც ასეთი, რომ დავაძალოთ, რომ მინდა თუ არა ქართველი იყოს მენეჯმენტში, ეს ვფიქრობ სახელმწიფოს მხრიდან რაღაცა ზეწოლის ფორმატი იქნება და ანუ შესაბამისად შეუძლებელია, მაგრამ რაც შეეხება მუშახელს და ადგილობრივ მოსახლეობას, ეს რომ ნახოთ მიმდინარე პროექტებში, ეს ერთი მათი ინტერესიც არის, იმიტომ რომ ჩაყვანა ხალხის არის უფრო რთული და ადგილობრივ მოსახლეობის რაღაცა ნაწილი, რომელთა გადამზადება ხდება და შეძლებს კონკრეტული სამუშაო შესრულებას, ისინი რა თქმა უნდა მუშაობენ და არიან ჩართულები ამ პროექტში.
I want to be now after talking for an hour and a half or slightly more, we become too serious. I want to share one story from this drinking water company regarding the green jobs and quality of job there. So I remember going to one of the treatment plants, not treatment plants, source heads of this company where there was pumping station operating, and I saw one of employees there having bed on a pump because during winter time it was the only place to get heated from the running pump. So that's, I mean, we have big problems in both companies in terms of workplace conditions, qualities, etc. There are many problems. But in regard to people and employing people, at least when I talk about the state-owned companies I came across during my career, the biggest problem was that for some reason the management of these companies were always thinking that the people in headquarters are the smartest guys in the world, and they were growing the headquarters bigger and bigger and taking functions of people in what we call regions, from regions to the headquarters. I guess this is again the problem of leadership. This is the biggest problem in all the industries we are discussing here, because businesses are done locally and businesses should go locally, if you understand what I mean. So in that regard, we will get more quality workplaces throughout the Georgia and not in just capital or several major cities. The highest paid jobs are unfortunately created in just few big cities, because for some reasons us managers think that in big cities we are the smartest guys of how to irrigate land, how to provide drinking water to people in Proceula village, and etc. That's a problem, the problem of mindset, I would say problem of leadership. So this needs to be addressed.
Yes, there are many problems to be addressed. I think I would like to conclude at this late hour. So I come from a country called Israel, and it has
Shalom.
it has among other things, it has a shortage of water. And Israel has come up with lots of technical ideas how to solve water issues, whether drinking or irrigation, efficiency, and so on and so forth. But one thing that struck me when I came to Israel is how much the people in their houses care about this resource called water. When you wash your dishes in Israel, what do? You don't leave your tap open. Use a little bit, you soap, and then at the end you wash. And there are commercials running on TV, and it's taught in schools, and it's really in everybody's heads, in consciousness, that this is a scarce resource, and we should be taking good care of it. And it's there. You know, when I come home and I see my Georgian housekeeper washing dishes, every time I have this, turn on the water and goes to the other end of the house to do something, and so on and so on. So, the bottom line, there's of course a lot to be done in leadership in terms of the companies and policy, and the businesses themselves, I guess, have to get used to start adopting maybe more efficient technologies and so forth. But there's also a lot we can do in terms of educating the next generation and try to take better care of what we have. And in this way, if not today, then in a few years, in a generation, we'll have a European Georgia. Thank you very much. It was very good. Thank you.